afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to the Canada Waits webinar. I'm really delighted to be here with you today, and warm thank you to our speaker, Ravi Jain, for joining us and sharing his expertise on the Canadian immigration law. My name is Marika Arovuo, and I'm the president of the Canada-Finland Chamber of Commerce. I'm honestly not surprised that Canada remains one of the top destinations for Finns considering relocation. I've personally enjoyed that this what country has to offer for the past 11 years. I've raised our kids here, seen them benefit from the education system and many opportunities available. Also, as a business owner myself, I also really appreciate the business environment here. The Greater Toronto area is a dynamic place to start and grow your company. And with the population about 7 million people and millions more within 100-kilometer radius, offering access to the strong talent and vast market opportunities is definitely beneficial for businesses. But without further ado, I'll hand things over to my colleague, Mikael Sillegren, who is the Vice President of the Canada-Finland Chamber of Commerce. He'll introduce himself and our expert guest today, session Ravi Jain. Mikael, over to you.
Thanks, Marika, and welcome to all the attendees for today's webinar. It's great to have you guys joining us today. I saw there in the chat that we have folks joining from Italy as well as Finland, and I see some locals as well here, so it's great to have a mix of folks joining from all over the world. As Marika said, we're going to be having a bit of a chat today with the star of the show, Ravi Jain, who is the founder and principal lawyer at Jain Immigration Law. So Ravi is one of Canada's most recognizable immigration lawyers with over 25 plus years in the space, with a very long list of accomplishments that he's achieved over his lifetime. So thank you, Ravi, for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Marika. Thanks, Mikael. It's great to be here. I guess we have a PowerPoint that we prepared with a colleague of mine, Ali, at the firm, so I can start with sharing that. So let me see if I can start the presentation. So yeah, I think I have to share a screen now first, right? So let's see. So if I can share the screen. Okay, so can you guys see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just go through, I'll whip through it quickly, and then if there's questions, we can chat about it. Okay, so this is our promo. If you're attending, you're able to have a reduced consultation session if you want a one-on-one. So that's there for you. You can just reach out to me directly or info@email, and we'll provide that to you. So Ali put together some stuff on me. So this is just a bit of my background. The medal I received, some recognitions by my colleagues, which are nice that happened. So that's great. These are not things you pay for, but things that our colleagues as fellow immigration lawyers have granted us. So these are some of the different recognitions, some of the different lawyer specialist designations and awards, etc., and just some of the activities. So I founded an Immigration Lawyers Association group and was elected president of that. And before that, I was national chair of the Canadian Bar Association Immigration Section from 2017 to 2021. And I've got 2 degrees, Canada and the US. I've got a Master of Laws. And I've been in the House and Senate quite a bit to talk about different immigration issues. And we're in the news a lot, so you can follow us on our website. We have a media tab. You can see the latest comments where we talk about different issues. But today we're going to talk about immigration to Canada. So immigration, typically the way people refer to immigration is around permanent residence. So it's like the US green card. So that's permanent residence. And then once you live in Canada a certain number of years, you can get citizenship, and that's the passport. But in between that, you can come as a visitor, you can come on a work permit, you can come on a study permit. But today we're mostly focused on these items, work permits. So why do we hire foreign workers? Well, Canadian companies, like to hire foreign workers, increases their competitiveness. We get a wider talent pool, specific expertise, etc. And there's really, there's really two main buckets of foreign workers. There's the ones based on a Department of Labor approval, and then there's all the others. And the others are called the International Mobility Program. And a lot of the ones that are open that allow you to work for any employer, those all fall under the International Mobility Program. And then the ones that are restricted to a specific employer can be based on the Department of Labor approval, that's the default, or it can be based on a treaty or intra-company transfer, number of other kind of different types of work permits. So if you're going to go through the Department of Labor one, that's the default. And the default when nothing else exists, when you're not eligible for an open work permit, you're not eligible for a work permit based on a treaty or a transfer within your company. This involves going to our Department of Labor, or we call Employment Skills Development Canada or Service Canada, and getting what's called a Labor Market Impact Assessment, or LMIA. So as I mentioned, there's two buckets. There's the ones based on LMIAs, and then there's the other bucket, which is the LMIA exempt work permits under the International Mobility Program, and that's based on economic, cultural, or competitive needs. So how does this apply to Finns, or maybe you're Italian, or maybe you're some other European national? So we don't really want to go with the default, right? We don't want to go with the Department of Labor approval because it takes a month of advertising, it takes several months for them to process often, and it's a cumbersome process. So if we can, we skip it. So by skipping it, we might look at a free trade agreement, right? And of course, for many European countries, like Finland, it's covered under CETA. So this is if you happen to be in the United States, you're American, or the CUSMA, or formerly called NAFTA, that's if you're American or Mexican. But the CETA is really the one we're going to focus on. And that one, we use it mainly for ICTs, intercompany transfers. So let's say there's a Finnish company and they want to incorporate in Canada, or they have an existing operation in Canada. Maybe it's a parent or subsidiary here. You can transfer senior people, executives, managers, and those with specialized knowledge. So that's the key thing we want to think about, is that you may work for a company, or you may own a company that wants to set up shop in Canada. So that's one way we would use it. The other would be contract service suppliers. And we have the criteria there in terms of the experience and what you get. And also independent professionals, which is quite interesting. So you're self-employed and you have a contract with a Canadian entity, you can also come. So the only issue is that if it's self-employed, it's not very good for transitioning to permanent residence under EE, or express entry, under the Canadian Experience class. So we would use something else called the Federal Skilled Worker Stream, and that's relying on your work experience abroad as opposed to work experience you get in Canada. But if you're not self-employed and you're an employee being transferred, for instance, then you're good. Those points count. And we can also switch you to a labor market impact assessment based one once they reintroduce the points you get for that. And then there's, of course, business visitors coming for meetings, conferences, etc. Or you're just exploring Canada to set up a business. I don't know if Monica did that, but I mean, you can also, if you're Finn national and you want to come and just explore things, you can do that without a work permit. And as we talked about the intercompany transfers, if you're just setting up a subsidiary in Canada, you can certainly do that under what we call a startup intercompany transfer of work permit. So the key managers, key people who are needed to set up the company, they'd be coming on. And then there's what many of you may have heard of, which is if you're between 18 and 35 and you happen to be a Finnish national, you can come under a working holiday, young professional, or international co-op. The thing about this is that Finns, unlike many other European countries, are allowed to do all three of these. So what would that look like? I mean, maybe you're coming on a working holiday, so you don't have a job lined up, but you meet the criteria. You have $2,500 in your account. You have medical insurance. You can apply, go into the pool. If you get selected, you can get a working holiday work permit, allowing you to work for anyone. It's open. Remember, I talked about open and closed work permit, so it's an open work permit. And then after working for a while, if you get a job offer and you want to use the program again, you can use it again. This time switching to young professionals, which is a closed work permit, which means you can only work for that specific employer. So those are typically the two we see. This is just about the difference between lawyers and consultants. It's the last slide, and we can open it up for questions. But it's just about, in Germany and the United States, only lawyers can practice law. And I just caution people who are new to the immigration system about immigration consultants. I mean, lawyers have to go through typically a 4-year degree and then 3 years of law school, and they have to get called to the bar. There's an exam for that. They have to do an interning year, articling year. So we learn about other areas of law, which frequently I have to refer to in my practice: family law, criminal law, corporate law. So we have that expertise to be able to at least understand the issues. And we have a lot to lose. So, we've given all the education and investment. So we really don't want to, we don't want to do anything unethical, certainly. So, so that's my presentation in terms of, just a quick lay of the land. I didn't want to dominate by just lecturing at you the whole time. And I know it's a lot of information, but the highlights are just about if you're a young person, you want to come between 18 and 35, there are ways that someone from Finland can come, Italy can come, and it skips all the normal kind of requirements of a Department of Labor approval. And it's a great way to get exposure to Canada, see if you like it. Of course, there's lots we could talk about in terms of permanent residence, in terms of if you meet a Canadian, you fall in love, you want to get immigration as a common law partner or spouse. And we can talk about residency obligations too, Michael. So yeah, I'll leave it to you. And if you want to have any questions, or Michael, if you have anything, or any of the audience members have anything, I'd much rather this be a Q&A and more interactive and dynamic, and I'm happy to chat with anything you'd like to ask me about.
Yeah, no, we appreciate, Ravi, you taking us through that. It was a great overview of some of the options that are available for Finns and Europeans to immigrate to Canada. If any of the attendees do have questions, there is a chat feature at the bottom of the screen there within Zoom. So please do post your questions in the chat, and we'll try to address those as we go through here. Maybe just to kind of start, one of the questions that I'm asked about as someone who has gone through this process recently, we came through the permanent residency family sponsorship with my family 6 years ago, and it was quite an onerous process to do. There's a lot of research and a lot of things that go into it. What are some of the services that your firm in particular, Ravi, can provide for folks that are looking to navigate that process that can be quite daunting at times for the average person?
Well, it's a good question. And I think it starts with the consultation. So I get a lot of clients who are victims of immigration consultants, or maybe they've tried it on their own. Their file's been returned a few times. So a good chunk of my practice is sort of fixing errors, or trying to, or just frankly being honest with someone that I can't fix them. I mean, you go to a doctor, you want a doctor to tell you the truth. You want a doctor to say, you go to a doctor and say, "Doctor, I have a pain here. I want you to cut me open." You're not going to a store. It's not like you're going to a convenience store and you're saying, "I'd like a Diet Coke." And they say, "Well, don't forget about your bag of Doritos," right? I mean, like, That's not how we operate. Professionals don't think about money. You don't think about what's in your financial interest. But if you're a business person operating as an immigration consultant often does, it's about how do I maximize profit? And if there's adverse information, we've seen countless examples of that not being shared. I mean, if you get a refusal or if you get a procedural fairness letter, which is a chance to explain a little bit further, then we as lawyers, I mean, you have to communicate that instantly. And if you get a negative, sometimes we take test cases or we tell the client it's a very tough case. If you want to try, I give it, 25% chance or 30%. I mean, I often won't take cases that are that low in terms of percentages, but sometimes clients understand the risks and they really want to try. And if I get a refusal on that, I tell them immediately. And then we talk about appeal, because sometimes, I mean, in this environment too, we had about 300,000 temporary residents 10 years ago. And a temporary resident is someone on a work permit, study permit, or visitor status. We had 300,000 10 years ago. Today we have 3 million. We have 3 million. So it's been a massive increase in the number of temporary residents. And, the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said, yes, we made some mistakes with immigration. There was a double cohort year of international students admitted after COVID because the community colleges and universities were upset that they weren't getting the money that they relied on, in part because the provinces were not funding them properly. So I blame conservative governments provincially and liberal governments federally. So all the different political parties, there's room to blame in terms of what happened. But they came in and many were promised a pathway to permanent residence, and now they're being kicked out. They're being told, you got to go. So, but on the other hand, the government is saying, if you're doing a master's or PhD, or if you speak French, we love you and we want you, we're going to expedite it, we're going to have a pathway to permanent residence. So it's a bit confusing, the messaging. But the larger point is that it's been challenging. So the environment we're living in now, it's difficult for many people to navigate immigration. And you're seeing a high degree of, I would say much less discretion. So you're getting a lot of refusals, you're getting a lot of frustration, a lot of really bureaucratic processing. They have your cell phone, they have your email address, but they're not there to help. They're there to return the application if they see one tiny thing wrong. And that's not really right. That's not really customer service. It's not really the Canadian way, but that's sort of what is happening right now. So this is the environment we're in because of the dramatic surge. I think things will settle down, but we're seeing, so when you say what services do we offer, I mean, a lot of it is, we're doing something just like I hire an accountant when I file my taxes, even though I took tax in law school. The expertise my team has on the details is really important, because if you make a tiny mistake, it seems like they just want to return the case. And by the way, return cases don't count against their quotas. So they have quotas every year for different lines of business, as they refer to them, right? Student visas, different types of work permits, permanent residence, citizenship. And if a case is returned, it doesn't count. So that's part of their goal, because they don't want to say, let's say we got 500,000 of these cases, and we process them in X amount of months. They want to show that their processing time is good, but they don't count return cases. If they counted those, their processing time would be much worse. So it's very confusing. They're sending messages that they love certain people, they want immigration, then they're saying, well, we let in too many, we're kicking them out. And then they're saying that our processing times are great, come to Canada. So it's very, very confusing. And so we offer essentially from start to finish. If you want to get a student permit or visa, if you want to get a work permit, if you want to get permanent residence, if you want to get citizenship, if you want to do corporate immigration, if you want to set up a company, we don't do that part, but we'll refer you, and then we'll do the intercompany startup work permit, and then we do citizenship, and we litigate. So a lot of immigration firms don't litigate because it's not very profitable. But we kind of want to stand behind our work. And if someone gets refused, we want to be able to appeal it. And sometimes we're going to the courts because of processing delays. Rarely, but sometimes we do have to go to court because of maybe there's a security clearance issue that's taking a long time or what have you. And we write it's called a writ of mandamus in the federal court to get them to move. And the court orders the department to finalize the case. But we have a lot of informal avenues before we get to that. I mean, we might escalate it in Ottawa informally or to a visa office manager. But yeah, I mean, so it's a full suite, essentially, individuals, corporate, litigation, humanitarian, you name it, anything related to immigration, and some US, because I'm called to the bar in the United States as well. So typically I restrict that to, once you're here, maybe you're Canadian, you want to go to the States now, get a work permit. I deal with the consulate, the embassy, and because they're in Canada, and the border. But if someone says, I want to go from Finland to the United States, I tend to refer that in.
Okay. So it sounds like that you and your team are well equipped to handle a lot of different scenarios, and that anything related to immigration and the application process, it sounds like you guys are there to help, and really do have the applicant's best interests at heart when you do deal with them. A couple of follow-up questions based on that. You talked about kind of the refusals and some of the things applicants not getting through. If you were to summarize maybe some of the bigger red flags or items that do trip people up typically when it comes to the application process, is there anything that you'd highlight for those potential individuals that are looking to come here that, here are areas that you need to kind of tread carefully or be very mindful of?
Well, I mean, on the permanent resident side, I think the biggest issue these days relates to how you're describing your work experience. If I said to you, okay, you're preparing an application for a doctor, and the doctor gets a letter from the hospital, and the letter says, this person's been a doctor, and this many hours, or this started this date, end of this date, gets this salary. It's on a hospital letterhead. You think that would be enough, right? No, that would not be enough. Why? Because you have not put the duties of the doctor in the letter. Okay, so it gets returned because there's no duties. Fine, the HR person or the chief writes some duties. This doctor sees patients. This doctor prescribes medication. This doctor performs minor surgeries or minor procedures. You think that would work? But no, it wouldn't work. Because the government of Canada has a list of duties for every job. And let's say the list for a doctor is 8 duties, 8 bullet points. But you've only listed 3. The law says you have to perform a substantial number of the main duties. So out of 8, what is substantial? Well, it means more than 4. You don't put 5 bullet points, you don't get your visa. That's how bureaucratic and crazy I would say some of the officers are, right? It does not common sense. It's on letterhead. It's from a hospital. We need doctors. Why would you refuse a doctor on that ground? So it can get very, very bureaucratic. So that's the common thing, is whenever someone's describing, they need to describe their work experience. They need to describe, they're claiming, I don't know, maybe they're trying to get a work permit and they're trying to say, look, I was a management consultant. It's not enough. Sometimes they put in a CV or a resume that hasn't been updated in 5 years, and they think that's going to work, and they don't. And if they're saying you're a management consultant, show me a bunch of reference letters that confirm you're a management consultant, right? So there's that kind of stuff. Some countries, they don't pay tax, like in the Middle East. Some countries, they don't pay tax because they don't want to pay tax, or they're below a certain threshold or something. So then how do you prove the employment? And if you can't prove it, you don't get the points, because the immigration system is such that the burden is on the applicant. The guy says, well, I know I worked. I promise you I worked for this company. Okay. But you don't have tax returns. You have some bank deposits. You have a kind of letter on the letterhead that doesn't look very good. and that doesn't have any of the detail that is required. So this is typically from visa requiring countries. From countries that you don't need a visa for, like Finland, I would say you get into these issues of the letter is not complete, right? It's just the employment letter is not complete. That's just one example. Student visas, there's language requirements now. There's if you want to get a postgraduate work permit after you study, it was $155 for the government fee. Then they introduced a $100 fee, but you had to pay it separately, and it was a sort of different area. In the language check, for instance, for the language requirements now, for the postgrad work permit, they rolled it out, but it wasn't on the checklist that you had to do a language test. So you just had to know, because of an operational bulletin that is sent out into the ether, you're deemed to know everything, every little rule that the Immigration Department puts out there, whether it's on a checklist or not, whether it's in the Immigration Act and the regulations or not, whether it's announced on their website, whether it's a bulletin that's just, published somewhere. You're deemed to know all those rules. So it's a very, very complicated area of law, and not to mention the case law. People are like me, we argue in court, and we develop a body of case law. And that body of case law, you're deemed to know. Even if you're just a 25-year-old applicant who has no idea about Canadian immigration law, and you're trying to just navigate it on your own because maybe you're trying to save some money, maybe you think that you're tech savvy. I mean, you're supposed to know all the case law, all the entirety of the immigration legislation, regulations, and operational bulletins that have been out there since this whole thing started. So it gets very, it gets very daunting. I see common mistakes for students where, they don't show that they have enough money, in terms of their bank accounts. They paid part of the tuition, or maybe I see another common thing. People get common law partners wrong all the time. They don't understand that if you're common law, in Canadian immigration law, it's someone who's lived with you for a year. So what I see a lot is someone says they're single, they get immigration. Then they want to sponsor their common law partner. And then they disclose that they've been living together with them for 5 years. Immigration comes after the person who got their permanent residence saying, hey, when you got permanent residence, you said single. But now I see that you're with someone. So that's fraud. So there's that kind of stuff. We see, there's issues with, what else is there? There's just so many issues. Common law partners, spouses, dependents. Oh, this is what I was thinking of. U.S. refusals or other country refusals. So since I've been practicing law, the forms that you have to fill out, there's a question. And one of the questions is a run-on sentence. Have you ever been refused a visa? It doesn't say very simply, have you been refused a visa for Canada? Next question. Have you been refused a visa to the US? Next question. Have you been refused a visa to any other country? If they separated it out like that, people would answer them properly. Some people want to deceive the government. I understand that. But for many people, they see this long sentence and they see something about Canada, about refusals, they say no, and they move on. But the question is asking about anywhere in the world. And that includes if you're turned away at the border one day. So nothing to do with an application or a visa application or immigration application or temporary residence application. The sad thing is that, so the government of Canada keeps very detailed records, especially with the Americans. So, and they check every single applicant. So if you have a US refusal because mom and dad went to the United States or applied for a visa or whatever, and you were 5 years old and got refused, and you don't put that on your application, an officer could very well find that you've misrepresented. And if you're found to have misrepresented, that's either, not indicating truthfully on a form, maybe it's an oversight, they don't care. Maybe you can say, oh, I hired an immigration consultant, they don't care. It's buyer beware. So if you've made the mistake, even if you have a representative that you told about the US refusal, and they don't put it down, it's your fault. And they will ban you for 5 years. So it's without mercy. I mean, that's the thing. The system is really not calibrated properly, right? Sometimes there is an innocent mistake. And the knee-jerk reaction of the officer is to refuse and ban for 5 years. And then the only recourse is to spend a lot of money in the federal court to try to overturn it. And sometimes those judges are not very sympathetic. So it's a very, look, I mean, I'm all for people immigrating to Canada, believe me. But I just want them to understand that it's not a very forgiving process, and there are a lot of complications. It's a very complex system, in terms of even the pool system. Like, when do you put yourself in the pool if you're 20 years old and you want to come here on a working holiday, or young professionals? When do you do it? And what are the chances of getting selected? That varies, and we can tell you that if the chances are excellent or not very good. If you're trying to plan your life as a young person, do I want to come to Canada and test the waters? So yeah, those are some of the mistakes I see.
Oh, that's very informative, right? Some of those things I would have thought would be kind of tripping points for an applicant, and it is a high stakes game, right? You don't want to misrepresent even by omission, by accident, with those types of consequences. We do have a couple of direct questions here in the chat, so we'll start with this one here. There's a question about, as a business, if I want to bring a student from Finland to work here for the period of 1 year, what is required? And is it just a formality to get a permit for this? So this looks like it's coming from a local business in the Toronto area.
If the student's over 18, the student does need the $2,500 in the bank account, the medical insurance, and we have two options. We have the young professionals or the working holiday. So we can look at both. We would look at, our law society, again, it's a bit of a difference between lawyers and consultants. I find the lawyers take it very, very seriously, the intake process. And we've been audited twice, because when you start your own firm, you get audited. And I started my own firm 4 years ago. And so we knew it was coming. And I kind of welcome it, because these are measures that are designed to protect the public. And so what they check is that they want to make sure that I've got the ID. So I've got the identification. That's know your client, basic know your client. So I got to get their ID. And I ask a number of questions, things that people are always wondering about, like, why do you care about my home address? Why do you care about my employer's name and phone number? But these are requirements of my regulator that I get this information. I also ask about past refusals. I also ask about any criminality, right? Sometimes someone has a drunk driving, or someone, they're, a business person. And, if you don't ask those questions, and then you're sending them to the border, and then they get turned away because they're criminally inadmissible, and you didn't do the waiver application, because there's a waiver application. It's called a temporary resident permit. And if you know, that's what we're trained to do. We're lawyers. We're trained to issue spot. That's our basic job. I tell that my team, when we're doing consultations, you're like a reporter. You're asking all kinds of questions. You can't just take what people say. You got to dig, and you got to take the time. So that's why I don't really, we offer a discount on the consultation when I do a presentation, but it's not something I can waive. It's not something that someone just emails me and says, hey, I need this person, give me the documents, and we're off to the races. No, because there may be something in this person's background that is going to create a big problem for them. And if they're refused and they want to go some other country, that refusal is going to follow them around everywhere they go, especially the Five Eyes countries, US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. We share immigration information. And the US, as I say, and Canada share very, very closely, especially criminal information. So I think the answer is, we'd have a session. I ask the questions of the student, get them involved, ask them about any past refusals or criminality. There could be criminality, you never know. And I'd ask about, if they have the funds in their account, how long it's been there. Another one you might like, Mikhail. So you ask, you don't think about this, but let's think, okay, $2,500. So someone gets $2,500 deposit in their account. And then immigration says, okay, I want the last 3 months of your banking records. And they see a big deposit. Well, they're refusing. So maybe we plan, maybe we do that. No, it's a student after all. I'm just saying, let's say you're 20s, I don't know, let's say you're 30, and all of a sudden you have a big deposit the week before you're applying for a working holiday work permit. Doesn't look so, right? But so, maybe it's a gift from your parents, legitimately fine. So make the gift, well in advance of when we're going to apply. These are little things that I pay attention to, right? So yeah, it's a matter of applying, making sure that they are a citizen of Finland, and they could have multiple citizenships. And then we look at the requirement for the bank account. We look at the medical insurance, and then we look at the pool. We look at the chances of getting selected from the pool. Maybe young professionals is an excellent chance because fewer people from Finland will have a job lined up. And that's a requirement of the young professionals. Whereas working holiday, it's like the backpackers working in a bar or whatever, getting any job you want. So maybe those spots are gone. So again, strategy comes into play. So we think about that. So that's the answer to that question.
On that, there's actually another question that kind of a point that you made there about is this person a Finnish citizen? And so there's a question in the chat about what options are available for Finnish resident permit holders for immigrating to Canada?
Well, if they're a Finnish resident holder, then they're from somewhere else, right? So maybe they're from China, maybe they're from India, maybe they're from a visa requiring country, in which case we got to get a visa. So the treaties apply to citizens only.
Okay.
That's the key point. So you might think, wow, I'm a Finnish resident. I've heard about CETA. I've heard about this International Experience Canada working holiday and young professional. I want to use it. My friends are using it. Can't. And that would be a waste of your money.
Okay. Well, that's a very clear answer that it applies to citizens only and not resident permit holders. For the open work permit that you're kind of discussing there, typically how long does that application process take in terms of from start to finish, and what would someone kind of have to expect when going down that path?
Well, I mean, there's various open work permits. So let's say your spouse is doing a PhD, right? Then and you want to join them. So that could be a matter of just applying online and getting it, depending on your citizenship and if you're visa requiring. Maybe you're getting an open work permit because your spouse, maybe your wife came and started a company in Canada, and now you're ready to join her. So you get an open work permit, but you'd show your marriage certificate, your spouse's startup intercompany work permit, and then we'd look at getting you an open work permit. Now there's some new rules around that, again, because they did go from 300,000 to 3 million temporary residents, so they tightened up even the work permit. So now you have to, she would have to have a work permit valid for 18 months and a high level one, and then you as the husband could get an open work permit. So there's that. Now for the working holiday and young professionals, as I mentioned, like you go into a pool, and depending on the time of year, the pool may be full or maybe open in terms of, well, you can enter the pool, but in terms of your chances of getting selected out of the pool will be good or bad depending on the time of year. So we have to look at that case by case. But yeah, it's not too long, assuming you qualify for a Finnish national. It can be done even at the port of entry, which is very nice. So,
okay.
Another question.
Yeah. So there
a few questions also on the Q&A. There's a chat and the Q&A. So just want to make sure you have seen.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I just look at the chat. So to start, he says there's a lawyer, Finland. Excuse me. Want to work in Canada, but not as a lawyer because I know that's not possible. Do you know if a Finnish law degree and work experience is generally respected in Canada? Well, I mean, we do have a very robust national credential assessment for foreign lawyers. So, there are firms that deal with Europe quite a bit. They may have a need for a Finnish lawyer. I don't know. But you'd have to take your NCA exam, and you'd have to take a few courses, and then you could become a qualified Canadian lawyer. And then, you might find it easier to secure employment if you're able to actually practice the law, but, license as a Canadian lawyer. But that's a process, and it can take some time to go through it. But there is a process for it. Let me just see if I can see the Q&A.
Yeah, I think I won't speak to like specific professions, but I think in general, those that are educated or worked in Finland are thought of quite well in Canada. Finland is thought of as a very innovative country with many industries. Finland maybe even ahead in certain sectors. So I think in general, Finnish work experience is looked upon positively, in a global context.
Yeah, I think we answered the question about the open work permit process, because that's about the pool and it's about checking to see one versus the other if you have a job offer or not. Absolutely is a typical next step to apply. Yeah, I mean, do you have to have a job lined up before applying? Yes. I mean, if you're going, well, yes and no. Let's say you came, the follow-up question is, you're on this type of visa. Let's say it's young professionals. So you came with a job and it's a closed work permit tied to that specific employer. And then is expected you have a job lined up before applying. Well, let's assume that that job is over and now you want to stay in Canada. You can do the working holiday one, which is open, which does not require an employer. So remember, Finnish nationals can do both. They can start with the open and go with the closed, or go with the closed and then go with the open. So you can either have an employer lined up to start or not, and then switch. So now the other part of the question is, do you typically switch to permanent residence? What I see mostly amongst my European clientele is that they've come here, they've worked, they've fallen in love with someone. Okay, so they're living with someone or they're married to someone, and then we get permanent residence that way. The reason I'm kind of encouraging that is because it's more difficult than ever before to work and then transition to permanent residence, because other people have more points than you. Why? Maybe they studied here. Maybe they did a master's here. Maybe they have perfect English. Maybe they speak some French. Maybe they have 2 or 3 years of work experience. So right there, that person's beating you because you didn't study here, right? Maybe depending on your work experience, maybe their work experience is of the type that gives more points. Maybe you came here and you had a different kind of a job in the hospitality sector, waitress or bartender, who knows? I just think that, depending on what you're doing, there could be a way to transition you under the economic stream in the future. So maybe you're fine because in a few years from now, a lot of the students from India and China and so many of the countries that came en masse, right? Like massive numbers of Indian international students, for instance, as their work permits following their studies expires, you're going to see a lot of them leaving. In fact, every month you see tens of thousands leaving because there is no pathway to permanent residence for them because it's been removed. Frankly, because of fraud by the consultants, because they used to get points for having that labor market impact assessment, that Department of Labor approved work permit. They would get 50 points, but there was so much fraud, so many people paying for those arrangements that they got rid of the points for everybody. So that's the sad thing when you get a little bit of knowledge about immigration law, but you don't have the regulator and you don't have as much to lose. You don't have 8 years of education invested. You have an online course, and so you're more comfortable engaging in fraud. So that's a sad thing, but I do think those points will come back. And I think by the time you finish working in Canada, you may have a shot at getting immigration on your own merit based on the economic category and the point system, maybe. But again, what I often see is common law partners, because in Canada, you don't need to be married, and 1 year of living with your partner who's a Canadian or permanent resident of Canada, and they can sponsor.
Very, very interesting. I think we had addressed all the questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So I have one final one for you, Ravi, before I turn it back to Marika to close the meeting for us. And you kind of just touched on it there with your last answer. As someone who kind of has their pulse on the immigration policies and having spent some time in Ottawa, I saw from your slides. How do you see immigration law changing over the course of the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see this as are we currently in kind of a window of opportunity? Do you see things closing down a little bit? Kind of, how do you see the current Liberal government kind of affecting our immigration law going forward?
Well, I think that, I mean, Prime Minister Carney is aware that there's a lot of scientists in the United States who don't feel comfortable going there, right? They're banning whole countries, right? And so there are amazing research, and he's attacking his own educational institutions, right? Harvard and others. So Carney sees this as an opportunity to attract very high level professors. There's already been several from Yale University that have come to Canada. So whether it's academics, whether it's scientists, researchers, there is a special immigration program for a small number of highly advanced researchers, right? Doctors is another one, nurses. I mean, when you talk about the point system, we didn't talk about this yet, but there are targeted draws. So instead of, and economists hate this, they just want a pure point system, because then it's like, it's based on education, work experience, language ability. It's just pure points. That's what they want. But the government has introduced targeted draws, which is really about meeting non-economic objectives sometimes. So for instance, having a lot of doctors may be good for the Canadian public, but expensive for taxpayers, is expensive for the state. But nevertheless, they have a targeted draw for doctors. Fine, fair enough. We need doctors and nurses. Construction, because they want to build more housing. Fine, fair enough. But you might not get, the points are being dropped in some cases for some of those trades professions, right? Same thing for French speakers. Nothing to do with the economy, nothing to do with the economic stream, but we're really dropping the points quite low for French speakers. So you could have people who have very basic education, very poor work experience, lower level, lower skill, but they're getting in because they speak French. So I see the government continuing along that path towards targeted draws. They've kind of, even though Mark Carney is an economist, like he knows this stuff, but I think he's not as focused on that right now. I think if he really paid attention to the immigration portfolio, he might tweak that. But right now, I see that staying. I see the continuation of a lack of focus on entrepreneurs and investors, which I say sadly because Canada's a great country. Marika, you said at the beginning, there's lots of business opportunities, there's lots of chambers of commerce, there's lots of, a good space for incubators, for, supports to start your own business. Wonderful place to do business. But we don't have a federal investor program because the Liberals at the time, many years ago, thought that's just people buying a passport. We're not like that. In Canada, we don't do that. Well, some of those people would bring an awful lot of money and they would, they would pay for, they'd buy big homes, they'd put stuff in their homes, they might start a business here. So it's sad that we don't have that, but we don't have federal investor program. We used to have an entrepreneur program. Start a business. So many people came from Korea and many other countries. They had convenience stores and they had to employ a couple of Canadians. That died a long time ago. No entrepreneur program. I don't see that coming back. There was a federal startup visa program for people who had innovative business ideas. They just killed that, again, because of fraud by consultants. So that program is dead. So there's nothing. But there's a silver lining because Ontario, I met with the Minister of Immigration for Ontario and he showed me his plan. And he's going to roll it out soon. And in that plan is an entrepreneur stream. So thankfully that's coming. I'm really happy about that. I hope the points get reintroduced. The points you get for having a job offer, whether it's a young person or whether it's a very senior C-suite level, like CEO, COO, CFO, those guys got 200 points. Everyone else got 50 points, including if you came on a treaty work permit. I hope they bring those points back, even though there was so much fraud, they got rid of them all. I hope they bring it back. But to do that, I think they need to really tackle fraud. And I think a lot of immigration consultants are really networked with the MPs. And I think that they help them with re-election campaigns. And former ministers of immigration have told me this. So I'm not optimistic about us rooting out the bad actors. So maybe we're going to have some hiccups as time goes on because we're not solving this problem. But more and more, as more and more attention gets put to it, and there are more and more victims that speak publicly, hopefully we'll get some improvements and we'll get the points back that we need. But again, it's not all doom and gloom. Like I do think that there are ways. It's just more complicated than it's ever been. And people say, "Oh, well, you must not be very busy because they're closing down certain avenues." And the answer is no. We've never been busier. And the reason is because it is so complicated. There's one last question. I'll just take a look at it before we let you go. How would IT professionals like software sales? Yeah. Is there potential changes transferring workers from one tech company to another? Yeah. So the great thing is that there is an exception to the requirement to advertise under the LMIA, which is the Labor Market Impact Assessment, which is the process, the default when you got to go through the Department of Labor. There's an exception where they say, even though the IT landscape has changed and there are more IT workers that are available with AI, there's some of them lost their jobs and there's more in the marketplace. There's more people with IT skills looking for jobs. Nevertheless, the government's a bit slow to act, and they still have a policy in place that if you're an IT worker, you skip the advertising. So you're still working within the Department of Labor first, but it's a much more streamlined process. And then we go from there to the work permit. So for IT workers in particular, there's a very good program that we can talk about that. But it sounds like this one could be an intercompany transfer under what's called specialized knowledge. Because remember I said workers can be transferred if they're manager or executive or specialized knowledge. So IT workers would be specialized knowledge. So we can either bring them in either as an intercompany transfer. If they're 18 to 35, we can look at the International Experience Canada, Working Holiday and Professional. Or, if they're from other countries, maybe they're in Finland, but they're from India, for instance, then we can use what's called the global talent. We can look at skipping the advertising, getting a quick approval from the Department of Labor, and then getting the work visa. All right.
Perfect. Well, that brings us perfectly to the top of the hour here. And from your answers and presentation, Ravi, there are many options out there. It sounds like programs come and go with the different governments that we have. So it to me sounds like having someone like you in our corner is definitely an advantage when navigating this immigration process, which does not seem simple by any means, even in terms of the roadblocks and things. So thank you so much, Ravi, for joining us today. It was a great session, a lot of insight. I know I took away some nuggets for myself. Hopefully the attendees did as well. So thank you very much. And Marika, I'll turn it over to you to close out the meeting.
Very good, very good. Let me quickly share the offer from Jain Immigration. So just repeating what Ravi mentioned initially, there's a special rate for the attendees. You get 50% off of consultations with the lawyer, and you can book it by emailing at info@jainimmigrationlaw.com. And then wanted shortly also to introduce the Canada-Finland Chamber of Commerce upcoming events. If you have a phone available, scan the QR code. It leads to our LinkedIn profile. So we are advertising heavily about our events there. Among the ones that are coming soon is the March 18th European Chambers Meetup. The date is already set to the March 18th. We have Young Professionals Meetup also happening in the end of March. Date most probably will be the 25th, but that's something to be reconfirmed. We are looking to host a Women in Leadership type of panel discussion in April. Our annual general meeting is due again in May. And in May, we are also celebrating the European Union Chamber of Commerce in Canada 30th anniversary. We have our Nordic golf tournament again in September. and then the European Chambers meetup, which is hosted bi-monthly. So you can assume after September it will be in November again. And of course our Christmas celebration then towards the end of the year. But thank you again on my behalf as well, and hope to see you soon again. The participants, thank you for your attendance, and like I said, those who missed the live session will have this available in the CFCC YouTube channel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.